Nithyanandam everyone, welcome back. This is episode 3 of the early history of the Ramakrishna movement, Swami Prabhananda. So in the first episode we went through sort of an introduction of the book, and the second episode we got into just about less than one page, because I ended up looking at some of the historical background of India in terms of the Goan Inquisition, which lasted nearly 300 years from the 1540s to approximately 1812, as well as the British colonization of India, which really sped up around the early 1700s, and by the early 1800s had in a sense replaced sort of blatant slavery with the abolition of slavery in the British colonies in approximately 1833, which was replaced somewhat paradoxically, or as you may say, with institutionalized destruction of as many as 1 million gurukuls in India, as per the census from the Bengal presidency and other presidencies in by the British own accounts, and the destruction of these gurukuls by 1910, whereas much of the Indian population was deemed to be illiterate, whereas before that they had as many as 1 million gurukuls that were also, whereas in many of the localities, as many as 70% of the teachers were so-called Shudras. So this smashes the bigoted attacks against Hindus as calling them castes, whereas casteism is in terms of a limiting, domineering lifestyle, is the British institution of what previously would have been a liberating the Jati and Varna system. So casteism, as it's generally understood today, never existed in Hindu India. That was the interpretation of the essentially British colonizers, which is even related to the purpose of why the Archaeological Survey of India was created. It was created to basically take the reins of telling the Indian history, so that all the archaeological revelations could be given a anti-Hindu interpretation, basically, rather than letting, objective interpretation of what is the historical foundations of the world's oldest living civilization and its strength of 1 million gurukuls. Let's take control of that, and we'll tell the story. So this is what is called Western Indology, whereas sort of so-called outsiders or Westerners interpret Hindu and Indian history through a westernized doctrine of basically domination and survival of the fittest, which nowhere in any way was ever part of the Vedic philosophy, and was in no way a foundation for the strength of the Vedic civilization, which is the only civilization that was a living 5,000 years ago and is still alive today. And of course, Tamil Sangam itself has a written documented history going back at least 11,000 years as just one aspect of Hindu life in India. So yes, so that is something we looked into last video, and if we're not careful, we're going to go back down that road again right now. So just get back into the book, and this is the page where, we got less than half a page. So it's a divine mission. Towards the close of his 12-year-long period of spiritual practices, Sri Ramakrishna had some prophetic revelations. One of them being that a community given to the liberal faith revealed in his own life was to be founded. The translation of this divine vision into practical form was one of the historic achievements of the world teacher, who was Sri Ramakrishna. He proceeded to actualize his divine mission in 2 phases. On his discovering a spiritual giant in Sri Ramakrishna in March 1875, the Brahmo leader Keshav Chandra Sen spoke of the saint in his sermons and in his writings for the journals. The Brahmos, people belonging to different indigenous and non-indigenous faiths, householders and youths from different strata of society, began crowding the master's room in Dakshineshwar, particularly on weekends and holidays. Also, the Brahmos and the Hindus invited him to their festivals and other occasions. His every visit, each time exuding joy, different from the ordinary pleasure of the world, brought together devotees and kindred souls. Their prime attraction had been the Paramahamsa, his charming talks, devotional songs, dancing in the joy of the spirit, and his slipping at times into the state of samadhi. Interaction among themselves as well as with the source of inspiration, Sri Ramakrishna made the groups cohesive. Celebration of his birth anniversary brought them closer still. As time passed, the circle of devotees grew wider. His influence on those who lived within his orbit became manifest in both their mundane and spiritual lives. In this way, the movement had a humble beginning, almost unnoticed, but its impact was undeniable. Sri Ramakrishna himself told one woman disciple, "Everything has been lifeless, but since this," referring to his person, "came, all these came to life again, and a current of religion is now flowing just a little below the surface." In the second phase, he carefully selected young men who were to form the core of the community he was building, testing the eligibility of each boy by natural means and by his supernatural insight. He completed their selection before he left for Kasipur. On the 11th of December 1885. Some of them had already joined Narendranath to serve their ailing master at Shampurkur. Now most of them came to Kashipur to stay with the master and serve him. Thus, more than a dozen world-renouncing bright youths, whom he called unpecked fruit, rallied around him, and before he passed away, he committed all of them to the charge of Narendranath, the most gifted among them, who later became world-renowned as Swami Vivekananda. Sri Ramakrishna appointed Narendranath to effectuate the divine mission that was revealed to him by the Divine Mother on successful completion of his 12-year course of spiritual practices, which included experimental verification of God in different religions. He was convinced that as an instrument in the hands of the Divine Mother, he would have found a new communion, specifically fitted for the liberal faith revealed in his life. Unavoidable organization. However, Swamiji had some reservations at first about the need for an organization and about its nature and scope. His ideas in this regard crystallized only after his visit to the United States. The power, organization, material prosperity, as well as the spirit of democracy, freedom, and injustice in Western society deeply impressed him. During that period, he had, as he said, the greatest temptation in his life in America, by which he meant no other than organization. He wrote to his brother disciples in 1894, "What is wanted is a power of organization. Do you understand me? And again, in another letter, to his foremost lay disciple, Alasinga, throw self overboard and work. Remember, the grass when made into a rope by being joined together can even chain a mad elephant. Later, Swamiji was to declare, to make a great future India, the whole secret lies in organization. Accumulation of power, coordination of wills. Organization alone is the primary means for all progress and the only way for the conservation of energy. He wanted a competent organization for the distribution and propagation of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, which he believed to be the modern gospel for humanity, now almost drowned in rank materialism. Nonetheless, Swamiji took pains to convert his brother disciples, clinging to the tradition-bound concept of self-realization and mukti, to the revolutionary new concept of organized religious life dedicated to the service of fellow humanity while seeing God in it. We may recall a homely scene at Dakshineshwar. One day Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in his room after his midday meal with M. Mahendra Hazra and others near about him. It was 5th of October 1884. M. held the belief that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation of God like Chaitanya. Now, M. said, "It will be fine if a current flows from this place. Everything will be carried away by its force. Nothing that comes out of this place will be monotonous." In response, Sri Ramakrishna gave a smile of approval. In this context, a vision that the Holy Mother had at Kamarpukur is quite significant. Sometime after the Master's passing, he saw Sri Ramakrishna coming from the direction of Bhuti's canal, followed by Naran, Baburam, Rakal, and other devotees. All on a sudden, from the Master's feet sprang a stream of water, which flowed in front of him in waves. She immediately plucked flowers and offered handfuls of them into the stream. The noble wish of M and the symbolic vision of the Holy Mother have already come true. As in the case of the glacier Gomukh, which gave birth to Ganga, there welled out of Sri Ramakrishna a spring tide of thoughts and a vast spiritual energy. A new stream makes its way through a channel before it gains volume and strength and makes its way across the plains. The Ramakrishna movement has supplied that channel for the good of humanity. By virtue of the devotion, character, spiritual fervor, discipline, and brotherly cooperation of the original nucleus of 16 monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, the Ramakrishna movement has spread far and wide. Spiritually gifted and specially trained by the Master, each of them represent one aspect of the power, as it were, that was Sri Ramakrishna. Rarely has so small a group achieved so much so rapidly. Never before had such a small religious community committed to the ideal of Catholicity, purity, and selfishness served so many people irrespective of religion, caste, or creed. Year by year, its prestige and influence have grown, firing the imagination of great thinkers in different parts of the world and touching the hearts of innumerable people coming into contact with the community. Sri Ramakrishna lived a unique life, historian Arnold Toynbee observed. His religious activity and experience were in fact comprehensive to a degree that had perhaps never before been attained by any other religious genius in India or elsewhere. Purely from his historical insight, he has also observed at the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center in London in 1959, outwardly his life might have seemed uneventful, yet in its own field, the field of religion, his life was more active and more effective than the lives of his contemporaries, Indian and English, who were building the framework of modern India in Sri Ramakrishna's lifetime. Perhaps Sri Ramakrishna's life was even more modern than theirs, in the sense that his work may have a still greater future than their work may be going to have. It was left to the genius of Swami Vivekananda to correctly read its meaning, observing in Sri Ramakrishna's life the convergence of the spiritual experiences of the entire world over the millennia and the redemptive implications of these revelations, as applied to the problems of humanity In both the present and the future, Swamiji garnered the spiritual harvest of his master with his own hands and entrusted his brother monks and monastic disciples with the responsibility of preserving and disseminating the seeds of his master's spirit. Swamiji believed that Sri Ramakrishna's advent was for the regeneration of all mankind. He did not stop with belief. He dedicated himself heart and soul to the execution of the cause of his master's mission. Explaining his role in this context, Swamiji wrote in a letter dated 26 May 1890, "Now, his behest to me was that I should devote myself to the service of the order of all renouncing devotees founded by him, and in this I have to persevere, come what may, being ready to take heaven, hell, salvation, or anything that may happen to me. His command was that his all-renouncing devotees should group themselves together, and I am entrusting with seeing to this." Wow. We're going to complete there for today. Wow, so yes, so that sort of reminds me in these ideas of what is discussed in the book. Of course, right? Seems small and then starts small, right? Like Swamiji is just a simple village boy, right? And he's been working tirelessly for 26 years, for 40 years actually, and seems very small, right? But organization, it's all in organization. Just organizing the people who want to work for humanity under Sri Kailasa. For what purpose? To enrich. Because there needs to, because even people who are not, monastic people, not sannyasis, not adinavasis, not brahmacharis, for them to see people living for others without holding things for themselves, to see the monks living, to see the brahmacharis living, that is enriching for those people. It's valuable for society to see people who are not controlled by society, but choose to enrich the society. Having the community that enriches society is valuable and needed. And one of the needs for the anti-life forces, devils, demons, to destroy indigenous communities is that you cannot have a society that controls people to have them run 9 to 5 for cash if their neighbors are living blissfully in a simple, proven way. So you need to destroy the simple, indigenous, traditional, sustainable cultures in order for people to be indoctrinated into the control of the modern society, consumeristic societies. So that's a requirement. So if people in the society see the monks living happily with nothing, that is enriching for the society itself, for the members of the community, even if they're continuing in their life of grihastha or whatever it is, for them to see those who are blissful and renounced from possessions and from the need to achieve things within the society, but to simply embrace the love that is life and to give that life to others, that is enriching. For others to see that is possible and people are doing it is enriching for the society. So just the need to organize Sri Kailasa, just to gather the people who want to work for the people, just to gather the people who want to work for sense, for sensibleness, to gather the people who want to work for liberation, to gather the people who want to work for intelligence, to gather for the people who want to live life freely and effortlessly and blissfully without any delay is needed and important. And so a big part of what we see Swamiji doing is organizing Sri Kailasa, organizing the humans of humanity, of planet Earth, into how can you enrich locally and globally? How can you change your life now into giving what humanity needs and make your life about giving humanity what they need instead of taking things that are not going to help us. So, and seeing the small beginnings, and saying that a very small community was there, even though the contemporaries seem to have achieved more, looks like perhaps Sri Ramakrishna's life was even more modern than theirs, in the sense that his work may have still greater future than their work may be going to have. So it may seem small, but we look how huge it goes. Just from a small group of devotees that were even involved in a different form or path of worship until they came to Sri Ramakrishna. So wow, the beginnings of Sri Kailasa and the beginnings of Sri Ramakrishna mission. So with this excited episode, we'll complete this segment, and the next one will be the Master's organizing faculty, the next episode. So with this, I'd like to complete this session chanting the Purna Mantra. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Tat Sat Sarvam Bhagavad Shri Nithyananda Paramashiva Parukarpunamastu. Om Nithyanandam. Nithyanandam, everyone. Thank you. See you next time.